Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And this episode of Podcast Stardust will feature the final installment of our year-long Revenge of the Sith series. But before we get into that and say goodbye to Revenge of the Sith, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Well, instead of saying goodbye, you can say hello there to us on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, if you're new to the podcast, then where you been? But second, each year we pick a movie that's celebrating a big anniversary, and we split up into 12 parts and talk about a 10 to 15 minute portion of the movie each month until we get through the whole thing. And so this year it was Revenge of the Sith for its 20th anniversary, and we're going to be picking up the conversation with the timestamp of 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 30 seconds, and we'll be going to the end. So we're not going to discuss the credits, but everything leading right up to the credits is about a 10-minute segment. It worked out really well, this one, which is hard to do this year with this movie. It was hard to get those even 10-minute segments, but here we are.
Did great.
I appreciate that. But I had to divide it up like into the middle of scenes a lot more than usual. So, but here we are at the very end, and we really are at the conclusion of the movie. There's not really any more action here. There's a couple little minor reveal. No, I don't want to say minors, but there are some reveals to go. But we are on the asteroid colony of Polis Massa, and Yoda is meditating before Bail Organa interrupts him and lets him know that Obi-Wan Kenobi has made contact. And the next thing we see is Padmé's ship is approaching, and Bail tells Obi-Wan to take Padmé to the medical center there. So I don't know that there's a lot of deep things to talk about here after this little portion of the segment here, but did it mean anything to you? Did it surprise you at all that there is something rather important about to happen? Of course, it's going to be the birth of the Skywalker children here, but it took place on an asteroid in like the middle of nowhere here.
Yeah, and I remember seeing this for the first time and thinking to myself, okay, here we go. The twins are going to be born. Like, here we go. And then, like you said, they're on an asteroid. But then again, I thought to myself, okay, that's kind of fitting because it's out and away from everyone and everything. And it's happening in this very out of the way kind of an area under secrecy. And, it just was kind of again, it's Anakin's vision almost coming to life in the way that even in the book, Padmé had said, oh, we're on Coruscant. Come on. Like, we've got access to all of these wonderful kinds of things. And even if we go to Naboo, I'll be at home. And yet here now they're on an asteroid. So, you get that feeling like, oh gosh, okay, this is really going to come to pass.
Do you think anyone ever told Luke and Leia that they were born on Polis Massa? Or did
that's
Luke?
A great question.
Yeah, or did Luke grow up his entire life thinking he was born on Tatooine, and Leia thought she was born on Alderaan, for that matter?
Yeah, well, I think probably in their younger years until they realized, exactly what their lineage was. But I guess that probably begged the question for them, like, yeah, where was I born? So that's a wonderful question. I wonder if anyone actually ever told them. I would assume that probably Obi-Wan at some point probably told Luke, and maybe Bail told Leia when she was old enough, especially after the Obi-Wan Kenobi series.
Or why would they, though? I mean, because if you tell Luke you're born on what context would that come up in? Because, when Luke is on Tatooine being raised by Owen and Beru, All he needs to know is the story that Owen told him, which is that his father was a navigator on a spice freighter. Where would Polis Massa come up in all of that? It could have easily been from Tatooine, and frankly, it might have been safer for him to say that, that you were born
That's
on
very
Tatooine.
true. Yeah.
And then, when Luke runs into Obi-Wan when he's old Ben on A New Hope, this subject never really, as far as we're aware, never had a chance. It could have come up off screen, but why would it? And then he
Right.
dies. And then his
Right.
encounters with Ben, there's a Force ghost, and it's about confronting Vader and finding Yoda and the like there. So I don't know. To me, it's just like, I don't know that they ever do that.
Yeah. You almost wonder if maybe it was one of those conversations off screen that maybe Luke had with Yoda and Dagobah. You never know.
But then again, why would Yoda tell him that? I mean, it's just Yoda is keeping from Luke that Vader's his father and that there's
True,
anything
yes.
amiss. It's like, you need to train to be a Jedi so you can confront Vader. But then it's
Yeah.
not until Luke goes to Bespin, of course. I mean, this, of course, I'm preaching to the choir. It's not until he goes to Bespin that he finds out that, Vader's his father.
Right.
And there's a
Right.
question about his whole paternity and the secrecy of which he was born and stuff like that. It's always been that he was this navigator.
On a
And
spice trader, yeah.
yeah, and then he died. And so now Luke has been raised by his aunt Uncle. But I don't know. I don't even know why I thought about this at the moment, but it just is, of all the places for
It's a
these two to be
great
born,
question, though,
they're
yeah.
Polis Massans. And if you look on this asteroid, there are these little aliens running around. They're not as big as humans in these spacesuits, and so they're Polis Massans, and we get to see them in the Darth Vader comic. That who was it? Pack wrote. We talked about
Oh,
some of
great
these
pack.
issues. Yeah,
Mhm,
and then when
mhm.
the Amidalans were trying to corner Vader and get revenge, they led them to this asteroid here.
Yeah,
And
they
we got to
did.
see some of these aliens. So
Good question, though.
yeah, it's something
Love
to
it.
consider. Ultimately, the answer is not that important in the grand scheme of things, but anyway.
Fun to
So
ponder, though.
so there's a lot of back and forth that happens now for the scenes. So we got what's happening with Padmé on Polis Massa, and then Anakin is being brought to Coruscant. Well, you can call him Anakin, you call him Darth Vader, whatever you want, where it's pouring down rain. The Emperor shuttle is being escorted to the surgical center, and then what they call it, the impalp whatever. I can't remember what they call it in
Oh,
novelization.
yeah,
Yeah.
the medical
Yeah.
center.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then he's pulled out of the shuttle and he's in that little floating gurney and he's being escorted by clones and Palpatine into the center. And he, you know, these are some determined people because he looks crisp and dead
Yeah.
there. I mean, he's moaning a little bit, but uh, they were determined and they were successful ultimately.
And every time I see this scene, I think to myself, I'm hoping that there's some sort of force field over Anakin as they're coming in because being a burn victim like that and then having rain fall on you with these fresh burns had to be excruciating for him, unless he was in so much shock at that point that it didn't even phase him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't see the Emperor being that caring when it comes down to it.
True. Yeah.
His anger,
Pain.
his pain, everything else gives him
Yes.
strength. So I suppose that would be it. But this does set up, and we'll see a lot of contrast between the environment Anakin finds himself in and what Padme finds himself in.
Yeah.
And the other thing that occurs to me is like, it's raining here. This is a baptism in its
Oh
own way.
gosh.
I mean, this is
Mhm.
the second baptism that Anakin goes. He gets baptized by fire on Mustafar, where the old Anakin is burned away. And now this rain, I guess that's not really a baptism, but at any rate, it's a change by fire. He's being born by fire. He's really whatever vestiges of Anakin are gone. They're wiped out by the fire. And now he's really being born again as Darth Vader here in this scene.
He is. That's a good way to look at it.
Right. In contrast, you've got Padme back in the medical center on Polis Massa in a very pristine, bright environment. Because when we see Anakin as he's being rebuilt into Darth Vader, it's this very, very dark room surrounded by these sterile droids. Now, Padmé's got plenty of droids around her, but they look a whole lot friendlier. They aren't all harsh edges and spikes and needles and the like. I mean, you think of the delivery droid, she's got these nice paddles and she's cooing at Padmé.
Right.
And then you got,
Ooh-bah,
yeah,
ooh-bah.
and then you got the droids that are tending to Anakin and they aren't saying anything. You just hear the hisses and the servos and things that are going on around them.
Right, but it's almost too sterile in a lot of ways and too
Mhm.
impersonal in a lot of ways, and, you understand it's a sci-fi movie and things are not gonna be as comfy as, like, a birthing room that you might see somewhere else, but
Mhm.
it's definitely not the experience that Padme had fantasized about, when
Oh,
she was
sure.
standing there on that balcony in Coruscant, "I know the perfect spot down by the lake, and I can fix up the baby's room," and all of the things. It's like it's a nightmare for her, quite honestly.
Yes, but I would say this, it's like she's surrounded by people who love her.
This is
You know,
true.
Obi-Wan and
Mhm.
Yoda aren't supposed to have attachments, but when we do see her finally pass away at the end of the scene, Yoda's distraught. I mean, you look at the expression on his face, just how wide his eyes get, his ears droop, and his mouth hangs open. And, you got Obi-Wan, who is a dear friend that's helping her get through this labor. Meanwhile, Anakin is in the surgical center surrounded by droids that are not talking to him. You've got the Emperor who's like biting his lip to control the chuckling that he wants to do
Yeah, I
over
know, it's so sick.
this how twisted this whole thing, and he's getting this this new perfect apprentice that's going to be encased in this shell and he can be manipulated the way he wants in this situation. It's all dark. If you look down at Anakin while this is happening, his gurney is on top of a dais, and the way that dais is lit, it's like the Imperial cog. It's like a
Mhm.
primitive version of that Imperial cog that he's on top of. And it's like, I don't know how much they intended it or not, but I choose to take that as one heck of a piece of symbolism that he was a servant of the Republic, but now he's becoming a machine of the Empire.
Yes, and, somebody had posted that somewhere, I don't even know how long ago it was, and I had never even made that connection before, and I'm glad that you brought that up again because it's so true, and just the way that the camera angle is as well on both of them, in some ways it's you're viewing them from the top down, and one of the views of Padme is from the side so that you can kinda see her silhouette as
Mhm.
her, before she gives birth to the twins, but yeah, it's just oh goodness, it's that bird's eye view above Anakin that just gives you the chills.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of smoke in the room, and he's
Yes.
all charred flesh, and they've got you see the two new artificial legs. He's got the one arm, and he's still missing the other there, and he's thrashing about like fighting with everything that's going on there as he's being transformed into Darth Vader for good in this situation. Meanwhile, well, we need to back up a little bit. So, Padme's brought into the delivery room and before she's even giving birth. The one droid comes out who's again, he's talking, he's got a very soothing voice, and he's trying to explain to Bail, Yoda, and Obi-Wan that, she's completely healthy, in quotes, but for reasons they can't explain, they're losing her. For some reason, she's lost the will to live. Did that ever sit well with you, or what do you think about? I mean, because this has been a serious point of criticism for this movie that Padme would just give up.
Mhm. Yeah, I know, it always kind of bothered me, but I guess the way that I let it sit with me is just the fact that it needed to happen for the storytelling kind of thing, but I know that, as you just said, that it's been such a point of contention, and a lot of people have said that that losing of the will to live was in some way, shape, or form Palpatine reaching out somehow and literally choking the life out of her. I don't know how much I believe that, but how far reaching his powers could actually be. But, there's part of Padme that I think too, she was living for Anakin and the despair that she felt, could have overwhelmed her, but I don't know, she's just too strong of a person for that. And to give up for her children? You
Yeah.
know? I just don't buy that. But like I said, for a storytelling vehicle, that's about the only way that I'll forgive it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see her someone who would give, she's giving birth to 2 children, but she's so despondent over Anakin that she would just give up and not live for her kids.
Right.
And like you said, that does not work for me. I also understand that we have this problem that Anakin force choked her. And, she was standing there pleading with him, and then Obi-Wan shows up and, he yells at her, betrayer, liar, you brought him here to kill me. And then he force chokes her, and then she collapses. And so on the one hand, it's like part of the story is there is this tragedy here that Anakin went through all of this to protect Padme, and then he ended up losing her as part of the bargain he made with Palpatine. And so he can't 100% be responsible for her dying. But then what else do you do in this
Mhm.
situation? Because, I've seen the theories out there, and there's plenty of support if you want to say that Palpatine somehow used Padme's life force to bring back Anakin from the brink there. But it's not like we see him do anything explicit. It's so subtle, it's so under the table if that's the case. It's a theory, but it's incapable of being proven 100% in that
Right.
regard. And so, okay, that's fine. I don't know. I feel like George Lucas kind of wrote himself into a corner on that one. And I don't know that this is really all that satisfying, especially since it never gets resolved elsewhere in any of the
Mhm.
movies or anything. And as much tinkering he's done with the movies, that seems like something he could have fixed if he wanted to, and clearly he didn't want to.
Mhm. Yeah, it was more of a narrative shortcut than anything else,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. But anyway, so getting back to the scene, the Padme goes ahead and gives birth to Luke first, and then I also think it's funny, like how taken back everyone is, like the announcement that, oh, we need to operate like quickly to save the babies, and it was like, what babies?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, she's carrying
Babies.
twins,
Scary
and it's like,
twins.
it's, I don't know, it's just kind of can you imagine the day these people are all having? It's like, one, we knew she was pregnant, but two, we
Oh,
just found out
Lord.
Anakin was the father, and whoa, now she's having twins. It's just like, what else is there?
Right? Well, geez, there was Order 66, and then there was Anakin turning to the dark side, and then there yeah, you can just see Yoda, like, he just gets this look on his face like, "Oh, boy, here we go." And
Obi-Wan, you got
Obi-Wan
any
is the
secrets you're
most
not telling us?
yeah.
How about you, Bail? What else is there that's going to happen today?
Well, Obi-Wan is the most animated out of all of them in all of these announcements, when the droid comes over and says that she's losing the will to live and Obi-Wan's like, "She's dying?" Bail's just kinda standing there dumbfounded, kind of looking back and forth between Yoda and Obi-Wan thinking, "What the heck are we like, what's going on right now? What's happening?" But since then, we know how much more of a respect that Bale had for Padme and
Uh-huh.
what a close I don't know if you wanna say friendship necessarily they had, but, they worked together very well, so you would have thought that he would have been a little bit more stricken than that, but maybe he was also he's seen a lot that day. Let's just put it that way. Bale saw things that probably a lot of senators don't see at
Yeah,
that
no
point.
kidding. I mean, he saw Jedi getting cut down at the temple.
Yeah.
He's rescued Jedi from Order 66, and he's suddenly seen the Republic turn into an empire. It's been a brutal couple days, absolutely,
Mhm.
in this case. And losing Padme is one more tragedy on top of a pile of tragedies, on top of everything. And you're right. I'm thinking of Alexander Freed's novel, The Mask of Fear.
Mhm.
Um, where that's especially where we get a lot of that, his thoughts about, back to his friendship with Padme and how much
Right.
she meant to all of them there. And so this is not an easy moment, and for anybody there, but it is, it's the big reveal of the twins, which is kind of funny because it's like when we think of the twists that happen in Star Wars, the two that people think of the most often are, of course, Vader revealing that he's Luke's father, and then the twist of the original trilogy is that Anakin becomes Darth Vader. But there are the other twists. In Return of the Jedi, it was that Leia is Luke's sister, and this would have been another twist for Revenge of the Sith, that, Padmé was in fact carrying two babies there. But
Right.
after everything else, it's like, it really comes off as such a non-event when it really should be like a major reveal.
Mhm. Yeah, I just remember thinking to myself, "Oh, here we go. This is where they're gonna be born." And I just
Yeah.
thought it was kinda cool that Obi-Wan gets to be the very first person ever to hold Luke. That's just I don't know, that just seems so symbolic to me, like, he's literally holding the hope of the galaxy, in his arms between he and both Leia, but Luke obviously being the first to be born, and then you notice too that he's just holding Luke and looking into Padme's eyes as she's straining to have Leia, like, he's definitely not looking anywhere else, but he's just holding Luke close to Padme, almost like, "Here's your son, hold
Mhm.
on, he needs you," kind of thing. It just was really symbolic to me, especially seeing I really paid attention to that this time.
Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, so she gives birth to the two babies, and she looks to Obi-Wan and says, I guess this kind of goes back to what you were just saying. She says, Obi-Wan, there is good in him. I know there's still, and that's when she dies
Mhm.
right there, mid-sentence and stuff like that, which is, now she did address both of her children by name, but she didn't really get to say anything to them, but name them in that case. And, I don't know. I mean, it's just this still, it's like you've just had these two children, these two beautiful children. And as you pointed out, it's like so much, she had such dreams for having a baby and setting up the baby's room near in the lake country back on Naboo and the like, and what she and Anakin were going to do and this, that, and the other. And now she's had these children, and it's not, you know, and who's to say exactly what her final thoughts were, what she thought while she was having this, what hopes and dreams that she had for the future of these kids. But it's like she turns to Obi-Wan, and her last thoughts and last words are about Anakin after all this.
Mhm.
I don't know. It just is I wish this scene could have turned out a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally agree.
But you're right. I mean, she was living for him, and
Mhm.
now he's gone, and so she goes. But and then again, I mentioned it earlier. It's like just how distraught Yoda looks,
Yeah.
and of course, the irony there is when Anakin came to Yoda earlier in the movie and was talking about his nightmares of someone close to him dying. And Yoda's advice was, mourn them not, miss them do not, train yourself to let go of all those things that you fear to lose. And Padme dies, and Yoda looks like he's just been hit by a truck.
Right. And the thing of it is that if Yoda would have known anything about Anakin and Padme's relationship at all, because I think to myself how back in Attack of the Clones too, when Padme shows up and Yoda says, "Oh, fear for you we did, but seeing you alive brings warm feelings to my heart."
Mm-hmm.
He always had an affinity for Padme. He always
Yeah.
seemed to have a real warm spot in his heart for her. And so now it's almost like you said, he's looking at the situation and thinking, well, holy cow, this is who he was talking about. Could I have helped him a little bit more in this situation? Yeah.
Yeah. I want to be careful with this conversation, though, because we've had this recently, which is, there's a difference between connection and attachment in this case. And we really got into this when we were talking about the novelization. And Anakin had an attachment to Padme. And, one of the great things about the novelization is it talks about how Mace Windu had an attachment to the Republic.
Mhm.
And what does that mean? It means that they were willing to bend the rules. Mace knew he couldn't just assassinate the Chancellor, but he was willing to do it for the Republic. And Anakin knew there was all these things that he was not supposed to do, but he was willing to forego those rules in order for Padme, in order to try and save her.
Mhm.
Just like Obi-Wan, his attachment was Anakin. Not in a romantic way, but as a brother type of way, someone he raised, someone he taught,
Mhm.
someone he fought for in front of the council. that he overlooked things that he should have seen, that he should have noted, that he should have brought to the attention of the council for Anakin. That was his attachment here. I don't believe Yoda had that for Padme. He definitely had a connection for her. He had a fondness for her. Not quite the same thing as this attachment that we're talking about
No,
in this
no, I would
situation.
agree. Yeah.
But he learns a lot over the course of this movie. It's, putting aside those feelings and teaching yourself to just let go of everything you fear to lose. It's, despite his age, despite his wisdom and all of his experience, it's really hard to put in practice.
Mhm. Yeah, and, just having the High Republic too, and just understanding the scope and the depth of all the things that Yoda has seen. And yes, there's been a lot of lessons along the way, but I do think that this has definitely been the hardest one for him.
Yeah.
And, and facing his failure as well in a lot of ways.
Right. And then a scene that I think is perhaps a little underrated is that final moments of Anakin being transformed into Darth Vader. And obviously he was Darth Vader before, but I'm talking about the Darth Vader we think about, the black suited, helmeted monstrosity that he becomes. He's lying there on the table, and then he's got the suit on. The only thing that's left is to put the mask and the helmet on over that. And so, he sees his burnt face, and then that claw has got the mask in it, and it's lowering it down. And as we get it from his perspective, and he's looking up through the mask, and he see through those red lenses, and just like how the whole world turns to red. It's like he's now being encased in this. If he wasn't changed before, he forever is now. This is how he sees
Yes.
he's getting his new eyes. This is how he will see the world forever. And when it like slides in, and you get that funk, as the helmet comes on, that suction sound, and that little bit of like, you can hear like the vacuum sealing of the whole thing.
Yes.
The sound design around that was just so perfect. And you get that sense that if you didn't know before about how artificial his world just became, there it is for you. He's been vacuum sealed into this suit. And, as Obi-Wan will say, he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil. There you go. That's the demonstration of it for you.
Oh, yeah, and, in a lot of ways too, you can see Anakin's fear, that there's nothing that he can do as he's watching this faceplate, this helmet coming down on him, and I think it was genius the way that they did it so slowly too.
Mm-hmm.
It's that anticipation, and you're watching this inevitability of what's about to happen, and, like you said, it's cinematically and sound design, like everything, the camera angles, everything is just perfect. The music,
Yeah.
perfect. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's his loss of humanity, and he loses everything he was, and he's now this symbol of darkness. And yeah, it gives me the chills every single time I watch that scene.
Right. And, we kind of got things out of order because it goes from that to Padme dying, and then it comes back to
Mhm.
Vader, and then you see the table is inclined. And originally, I remember back in the trailer for Revenge of the Sith before we saw the movie, the original version of it had his hands up, shackled up by his helmet. And that got such a poor reception that they digitally altered it so that when the movie came out, his hands were shackled down by his waist.
Mm,
But,
I didn't know that.
oh yeah, yeah. So the table gets inclined, and then Palpatine approaches and leans in and says, Lord Vader, can you hear me? And Vader turns to him and says, where is yes, my master. Where's Padme? Is she safe? Is she all right? Palpatine's response is, it seems in your anger you killed her. I could do this so much better if I didn't have this cold.
Nice.
But at any
Still
rate,
sounds really good.
oh, thank you. But then Vader gets angry, and he starts using the Force to destroy things. He's like, no, she was alive. I felt it. And then he does that Frankenstein, he yanks the shackles off the table and steps off there really awkwardly, and does that no that they end up adding to Return of the Jedi in the special edition later there. But what do you think his kind of his rebirth here as Vader?
Well, I think to myself, I wonder what Anakin thought when he heard his voice coming through the vocabulator, that that he's not himself. Like, this is his new forever being. And then to hear Vader talking about Padme in Vader's voice, that was just, and again, we referred to, or at least I know I do, I refer to Anakin as Anakin up to the point where that mask goes on. And
Yeah.
then you can always know that there's Anakin inside, especially when he's inquiring about Padme. But it's such a tragedy when you think about that. Here is this visage of murder and of all of the things that Vader stands for in evil, but he's trying to be tender in that moment. And then when he
Yeah.
realizes that he's lost her forever, and like you said, he's done this no thing in crushing everything around him with the Force, you can see Palpatine, like you were saying earlier, just holding back like a chuckle.
Yeah.
And he's so pleased. Like he's
Oh yeah.
just beside himself with joy, thinking to himself, okay, he's literally half the man that he used to be, but he is still this powerful. Look at this hate. Look at this evil that I am about to have at my disposal as my minion, basically, and being able to do anything that I wanted him to tell me to tell him to do. He was just in pure joy at that point, and that makes it even more awful,
Yeah.
when you think about it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like I think of the scene here and those lines. It's like, where's Padme? Is she safe? Is she all right? And then that no, when we get to the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting, and Anakin's mask is kind of half destroyed, and Vader says to Obi-Wan, is like, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did." I think like this is the moment where Vader actually kills Anakin
Yep.
inside. It's that whole no when he's told that he's the reason that Padme is dead. It's like he destroys Anakin so that he doesn't have to confront that anymore.
Yep.
And that's where he truly becomes Vader.
Yes, yes, I agree with you, and like you said, and I need to go back and watch the Obi-Wan Kenobi series again. It's been a hot minute, but
Yeah,
it's so good. It's so good.
absolutely. Okay, so back on Naboo, Obi-Wan, Bail, and Yoda are in a conference room aboard the Tantive 4, and they're discussing what they're going to do with kids. And they agree that they have to hide the children somewhere where the Sith cannot detect their presence. I thought that was interesting here because, it's back in the Legends days, there was always the sense that Force users could kind of detect each other. But once the Legends got set aside,
Mhm.
that really kind of became like this murky thing that didn't exist so much anymore. But I don't know, for whatever reason on this viewing that really stuck out to me, that there was this fear that the twins could just be detected at this point. And when you consider it in that context, it makes more sense that they had to be split up because together they would have been easier to find
Mhm.
as if you kept them apart.
Yeah, there would be a stronger beacon of the Force, if you
Yeah.
will, kind of thing. But did you ever wonder, I understand the reasoning for wanting to take Luke back to his family on Tatooine, because probably Vader would never want to go back to Tatooine. However, it almost does seem a little too convenient that they kept his name,
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah.
Skywalker,
You know, for years it was explained away as like Skywalker is like Smith in our world, but like it
Mhm.
really is not.
But it's
And
not.
especially if you read the novelization and the beginning, the little prologue talks about how big a heroes Kenobi and Skywalker are.
Yeah.
That and now look, it's also a kid on a moisture farm. So how likely is it that the exploits of this kid are going to get anywhere near Mos Eisley, let alone off Tatooine, into the ears of the Empire? And as far as Vader and Sidious knew, Padme died before she gave birth to the kids.
Mhm.
So this isn't even a possibility. So they weren't even looking. But yeah, I mean, you could have just called him Luke Lars,
Right. Right.
and even better protected him than what was going on.
Exactly. Oh, 100%. But Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. So Bale's going to take Leia back to Brea, and they're going to raise her as their adopted daughter on Alderaan. And then Luke, as you just were suggesting, is going to go with Obi-Wan to Tatooine and be given to Owen and Beru, where he's going to be raised. But before they can split up to act that plan, Yoda tells Obi-Wan to wait. He has training for him, that an old friend has learned the path to immortality, and he's going to teach him how to commune with him, which of course Obi-Wan realizes is Qui-Gon. And we come to find out again in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that that's not as easy as it sounds, because it really
Right.
takes Obi-Wan a long time to get in the proper mindset in order to do that. But of course, the subtle irony to all of this is Anakin fell to the dark side to try and discover the secret of immortality so he could save Padme. And of course, the Jedi had figured out this secret through Qui-Gon, which is you become one with the Force and you become immortal. So, not exactly what Anakin was going for, but he actually stood a better chance if he had not fallen to the dark side.
Right. It's very ironic. And a couple things there. One, I didn't realize that they were on Naboo in this scene. I guess I always just thought that they were still on Polis Massa before they decided where they were going to go. But it does make sense that they would have taken Padme back to
Yeah.
Naboo.
Because you see the
So,
Tantive 4 flying to Naboo right before they have this conversation.
okay, I guess I
Yeah.
never picked up on that. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I only did because I was doing the moment by moment notes in order to
Mhm.
put this together. But yeah, you're
Mhm.
right. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is immaterial where they were before they had this
Right.
conversation, but it just so happens
Right.
that that's the way it was.
Yeah, and then the other thing that, I picked up on then too, when you were talking about this, how to commune with Obi-Wan, do you think that Yoda would have shared that with with Obi-Wan about Qui-Gon in another context so soon? Or was it just because of all of these events that had facilitated or precipitated the reason for him to tell him this at this point? Because how long has Yoda known this? That he
Well,
could
if you go by the novelization, he'd been stumbling into this, and it is in these moments that he finally submits to Qui-Gon to learn the teaching himself. So according to the novelization, Yoda hadn't completely even mastered this at this point,
Mhm.
because he does that supplicant, like, student bow to the Force Ghost, to Qui-Gon, to indicate that he will be the student. He used to be Qui-Gon's teacher at one point, but now he's going to be the student. He humbles himself and he's going to learn this. And so I think this is something that Yoda's only recently learned. So it's not necessarily that he had an earlier opportunity to teach it to him. And, you know, he's getting ready to part from Obi-Wan. So it's not like he's going to have other opportunities to tell Obi-Wan about this as well. And
Right,
so I'm
yeah.
not sure he had. So I think this was kind of like the moment for this to happen.
Yeah, that's what I was meaning, like, this moment precipitated the reason for him to share that information with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, I
that
think
he
you're right.
wasn't gonna say to him beforehand, like, "Oh, by the way, I'm learning this," kinda thing. But
Indeed.
and I also appreciate with the costume design too, how you can see Obi-Wan's tunic and his clothing that has been ash worn and burned and, in the whole 9 yards, and that he's not gonna get a change of clothes. I mean, where is he gonna get a change of clothes? He's not gonna go back to the temple and grab himself a new Jedi outfit. So he's going to Tatooine with those tattered clothing, and then I can just picture him, and I know I've told you this before, being in his hut there on Tatooine with his trunk of old Jedi clothing, like, lovingly darning the holes, and, I don't know, it's just I guess I'm a little romantic when it comes to that, but I just thought it was such a great storytelling piece that they
Yeah.
had those details in there.
I certainly did notice how much his robes were, endured wear and tear in A New Hope after seeing Revenge of the Sith.
Mhm.
Because it didn't stand out to me nearly as much. But yeah, now that you had an opportunity to see those robes get singed and, embers make their mark on them, yeah, you can pick up how threadbare they are by the time he gets to A New Hope, for certain.
Yes.
Not much easier. So wrapping up a little bit more business which is also known as how come the droids never talked about any of this and during the original trilogy. Bail delivers R2 and C-3PO to Captain Antilles with the following instructions: treat them well, clean them up, and have the protocols droids mind wiped. So
What?
yeah,
And R2
yeah.
giggling.
I mean, I will go to my grave arguing that C-3PO did not deserve this in the least bit. And frankly, it's, R2 was the more dangerous one to have his memory
Oh,
left
yeah.
intact between the two of them. But, R2 doesn't speak in English. He speaks binary. And so we don't have to worry about that so much from a narrative perspective when it gets to original trilogy. And we do have to explain why 3PO never talks about any of these things.
Mhm. It's very true. I just saw a meme that said, why did R2's mind not get wiped? It's because he knows how to keep his mouth shut. But I'm with you. I think that 3PO, he could have if he needed to, because even in the Clone Wars, we saw that he could keep a secret when he had to.
Well, and he can also be duplicitous when he wants to. I mean, think about in A New Hope when they're on the Death Star. He tells when they're about to be discovered in that control room, he and R2 lock themselves in the closet. When the stormtroopers come in, he's like, madman, they run off to the detention center, blah, blah, blah. And then when the one stormtrooper leaves them behind, they need to leave. He's like, all this excitement has caused a short circuit in my counterpart. I'm going to take him down to maintenance and stuff like that. He knows when to fib, when to bend the truth,
Mhm.
and not just to blab anything to anybody. And there's no reason to believe that he's more susceptible to give up that information than R2-D2 would be.
Right.
So, I mean, look, if we want to get into the narrative reasons why it had to happen, yeah, absolutely. There had to be a reason. I just, the other thing is, it's just like, you know, Bale made this decision here. I kind of wish it would have been like during the escape from Mustafar, like 3PO suffered damage, which resulted in them having to do like a mind wipe in order to restore him or something like that, as opposed to this conscious decision to wipe his memory in that
Right.
regard. Because he just, like I said, he just didn't deserve it. And I don't, I get, a reason's a reason, it ultimately doesn't matter. But again, 3PO, he didn't do as much as say R2 to contribute to all these victories, but he still was part of the story. He was a loyal servant to Padme. And when you wipe that memory, you also lose that much more of Padme. So
Exactly. Yeah, it almost makes you wonder, what was the real reason that Bale wanted 3PO's memory wiped? What was the actual, like, thought process behind that?
yeah, I mean,
And not R2's.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, because again, I'm thinking of Mask of Fear by Alexander Freed when they're waiting on the results of the vote at the end of the book. Bale wants 3PO nearby because it reminds him of Padme.
Right.
And there's some
Right.
comfort there. Well, okay. Could have been even more if you hadn't wiped his memory, but all right.
Exactly.
So, okay. Well, back on Naboo, we get the funeral procession. And like all of Naboo comes out to pay the respects as there's there you have the procession going down the streets. Boss Nass, Jar Jar, Padme's parents, her sister's children, the current queen are all part of the procession there. She still looks pregnant, which I know is something they pointed out in the novelization to maintain the illusion that these twins did not survive. And
Right.
then she is clutching the Jabor snippet in her hand as she is wheeled off to her final resting place.
I love that.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
And then we see the Venator Star Destroyers as the Imperial fleet. Vader marches onto the bridge and he stops next to Palpatine. Tarkin is there, excuses himself, and then we see Sidious and Vader overlooking the construction of the Death Star. So, foreshadowing what we're going to be seeing in A New Hope. And then back on Alderaan, Bale delivers Leia to Brea, and on Tatooine, Obi-Wan delivers Luke to Owen and Beru. And we get to see Owen posing much like Luke will in A New Hope to wrap up the movie. We get our final credits. That brings us to the end of the movie.
Such great mirroring there with,
Yeah.
Owen posing like Luke. It's so
Yeah.
great. And I
Very much a
love
ring
seeing
theory moment. Yeah.
Tarkin. Oh, yeah, and I love seeing Tarkin up there, just that little snippet. It was just
Uh-huh.
perfect, like, "Okay, here we go." And did you notice that the music too, when, Anakin is changing into Vader, they actually used the same music, Qui-Gon's Noble End,
Oh,
that they
okay. Yeah.
did. Yeah, it's the same music, and then once that view of the bridge, it slowly starts to morph into the Imperial March.
Yeah.
So it's again, letting go of the old and then embracing the new, but I always wondered why they chose that same. I guess it's because it's a funeral dirge.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just, kind of a galactic funeral dirge maybe in the end, but I think Alderaan very much reminds me of Alaska. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. It's got some of the similar motifs and stuff like that. I mean, it's
Mhm.
also very Swiss maybe looking with the mountains and
Mhm.
that type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, you get that, the snow, the trees, and the like there. But yeah,
With the
that's a good
green.
comparison, right?
Yeah,
You just need a cruise ship and a fjord to sail down, and
there
some
you go.
icebergs and whales, and you get complete. Oh no, go back to Alaska. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, yeah. I don't know, and I just it's the this last couple minutes do such a great job of ending the prequel story and giving us introducing the elements that we'll get in the original trilogy. And it's a nice transitional piece.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So we've now done all three movies of the prequel trilogy and in one of our year-long series here. Is there anything, we got these movies after we got the original trilogy. Is there anything you wish they had done differently with the prequels in order to set up the original trilogy?
Quite honestly, I love everything about the prequel trilogy. I mean, we could nitpick, as we did with, oh gosh, why did Padme have to die that way? Or I personally love Jar Jar, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And, so why were certain things presented the way that they were? Or why was this done the way that it was? But I think it's absolutely perfect, honestly. And I feel that the prequels truly are, some of the best Star Wars that we have. And of course, I always have a wonderful, near and dear feeling to my heart kind of thing for the original trilogy because it's the original trilogy. It's what started it all. But there's something about the prequels, and I'm so glad that it's gotten such revived respect, especially within, I think, the last probably 5 years or so. And I think a lot of that is because the kids that grew up with it is their entry point into Star Wars are now adults, and they truly, do appreciate it. But for me personally, I love everything about it. I really do. Even though like I said, some of the stuff gets gruff, people talk about Anakin and his whininess and whatever, but I think it's all good. I really do. What about you?
Yeah, I wasn't asking so much about the performances and the things like Jar Jar. I was thinking more like the narrative elements here. And simply
Mhm.
it's that, as I was talking about a bit earlier, the big twist of the original trilogy is that Darth Vader is Luke's father and stuff like that. And when you watch just the original trilogy, you can watch A New Hope and then The Empire Strikes Back, and you get that big twist. I mean, it's like the original big twist, of the movies. And so, I mean, how many movies have tried to capture that exact type of moment where everyone in the theater is just like gasping and, like, is that true? That type of a thing.
Yeah.
And then, you get the additional twist in Return of the Jedi that Luke and Leia are brother and sister. But if you start with the prequel trilogy and you watch those movies, and I don't want to talk about the machete order or anything like that. If you watch these in episode order as opposed to the chronological order in which they were released, the whole twist of The Empire Strikes Back is nullified
Right.
because, you
Mhm.
learn that Anakin's Darth Vader, they show you the transformation, and then, you get to see Padme give birth to the twins. And so, Luke and Leia are kids. So if as much as I love these movies and I you know A movies, no problem. I don't disagree with that. I don't dislike them. I just wish it would have been possible to somehow tell us a story so that you could watch all 6 of these movies and still preserve. You can watch them in episode order and still preserve those twists as they come up in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And you don't have to do the mental gymnastics of tricking people to watch them in machete order. Because
Mhm.
I understand, how that effect can work, but at the same time, it's like you're really tricking people to watch these like in no natural order, if you know what I mean, in
Mhm.
that regard. And so again, if it's and this is not perfect, but in Revenge of the Sith, yes, we know Anakin falls to the dark side, but Palpatine doesn't name him there in that moment. He, rise my new apprentice. And then after we see Anakin defeated on the shores of Mustafar, we don't see Palpatine come rescue him. But then at the end of the movie, all of a
Mm.
sudden there's someone who shows up in a black suit. Yeah, you'll lose the big scene where you've got the comparisons where you can put Padme dying in childbirth and Anakin getting his resurrection as Vader side by side. And that would be a heck of a scene to lose. And also, maybe we don't somehow preserve the Obi-Wan rescues Padme and we don't necessarily see the birth of the kids there. And so all we
Mhm.
know is that, we don't know exactly what happened. I don't know. I don't know how exactly we would do it. There's people who are more clever than writing these things than I am. And I also suspect that it's like at some point, George Lucas just said, I'm not worried about that. You can make your choice whether you're going to watch them in the order they came out or you're going to watch them in the episode order and you're going to get one set of surprises one way and a different set the other way. And fine, that's fine. But it just would have been cool if somehow they could have made that all work.
Mhm. Oh, no, I think there's a lot of validity to that kind of narrative to try to really preserve those surprises. I just don't know, like you said, it really have to be creatively, careful to be able to do that, and,
Yeah.
like you said, if George Lucas said, "Hey, you can watch these in any order you want to, and take your chances," kind of thing, but I guess that's why a backstory is a backstory. There's
Yeah.
not a whole lot you can do, you're presenting the story, but I know from and I guess this is just speaking from that point of view that we already knew what happens in the original trilogy, obviously, but getting that satisfaction of seeing how it happened and, that exact moment that all of those things ended up coming to pass.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a moot point, though. I mean, except for like some kids who just don't get exposed to this, Star Wars until they're like 6, 7, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, the average adult, it's in the cultural zeitgeist. I am your father, right? I mean, it's just
Right.
you may not understand everything about Darth Vader. You may not understand everything about Luke Skywalker, but that's something, we were talking about in the news episode we did last Friday about how like I hadn't seen Stranger Things, but there were certain things I knew about it because it's just all over it's in the cultural zeitgeist right now. I mean,
Mhm.
it's you can't go on social media without hearing about some of these things. And so yeah, that's where we are. And so it's unlikely most people even going in to watch Star Wars the first time haven't heard something about Vader being Luke's father. And what, because it's all over t-shirts, no, I am your father, Luke, I am your father. People get it wrong. But at any rate, like I said, just the perfectionist in me would love to have seen that, but it is what it is, and it's still fantastic. So
Oh, absolutely.
all right. Well, that's it. We have concluded Revenge of the Sith, another one under our belt. And
Yes.
we now get to announce what our movie for next year is. Jay, would you like to do the honors?
Oh my goodness, I get an early Christmas present. Yes, Dennis and I have decided that we will be reviewing The Force Awakens.
Yeah. Now, you all may be asking, why are you doing The Force Awakens for its 11th anniversary? That's a very good
Well,
question. And the answer is because its 10th anniversary was the same as the Revenge of the Sith 20th anniversary. And there is no movie that's celebrating an anniversary with a 10, ends at a 0 or a 5 next year that we haven't already covered. So
because we did Rogue One, so
yes, we did Rogue One. So we basically decided since we could only do one movie, or we were only going to do one movie this year, that we are going to fill the hole with The Force Awakens in 2026. So we're looking forward to talking about that. We are looking forward to having you all join us for that. And yeah, so each month you can look forward to a 10 to 15 minutes, an hour long episode covering a 10 to 15 minute segment from The Force Awakens. And it'll be fun because we haven't done any of the sequels yet in
Right.
this. So,
Yes, looking forward to it.
yeah, look for that in January. All right. Well, then, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of Revenge of the Sith. Thank you for being with us all year if you've done that. Thank you for showing up for this one. If it's your first, you'll be able to find all the previous episodes on your podcatcher of choice over at retrozapp.com. And if you subscribe to the podcast, then you'll be able to get all of the episodes in our upcoming The Force Awakens series next year. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else they can reach us online?
Absolutely. So we're super easy to find. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust, and we have tons of Pinterest pages. So you can check out all of those for tons of ideas for everything Star Wars. And if you need more places to listen to us, you can hit us up on both YouTube and YouTube Music. And both of those do have subscriptions available. So please subscribe, share those with your friends. Let us know what you thought of our year-long discussion of Revenge of the Sith and more. And you can also email us your thoughts at podcaststardust@gmail.com. Please send us your questions. And when we have enough, we will put them together in a listener question episode. And we really would love to do that. So please drop us a line. And we also have our TeePublic store. So if you are in need of some Podcast Stardust swag, you can hit us up at the link in our show notes. And we do have 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of fun things. So please check that out.
Okay, so upcoming on the show on Friday, we are going to end the week with some recent Star Wars news. And then on Monday, we are going to get into our year in review episode for Star Wars here on Podcast Stars. So make sure you hang out and check that out with us. Okay, thanks for listening to episode 979 of Podcast Stars. Everyone, have a great rest of the week. And until next time, may the Force